It all started on one of those ordinary days that we barely notice pass by. It was already night when my daughter, with her curious eyes and a mixture of anxiety and shyness, handed me a pink envelope. "Mum, I wrote something for you," she said, with the gentle voice that only children have when they're about to share a secret. It was one of those moments when time seems to stand still and you wonder what is coming. In the past few months, the routine had been intense. Work, commitments, and that feeling that there's never enough time for everything. Many times I found myself wondering if I was present enough for her, if I really knew what was going on in her world. Have you ever felt that way? As if you were missing precious moments? And then, with my heart already tightened by a restless curiosity, I opened the envelope. Inside it, a letter written in crooked and colourful letters, typical of a 9-year-old child. The title struck me, "What I Will Never Say Again." I stood there, with her words in my hands, feeling a chill run down my spine. What could be so important to her that she needed to write it down like this? The letter began with sweet memories of moments we spent together. "Remember, Mum, the bedtime stories?" And continued with an unexpectedly changing tone. She talked about times when she wanted to tell me something important, but realized I was too busy. "I was going to tell you about the butterfly I saw at school, but you were on the phone, double." The simplicity and depth of her words hit me like an avalanche. But there was something more in those lines, something I didn't expect. She wrote about her fears, about moments when she felt small in the world, and how often she remained silent, thinking it wouldn't matter. "I won't say I'm sad anymore when you're tired," she wrote. And that's when I felt my heart break. The moment I read that, the tears came without warning. A mix of sadness and guilt overwhelmed me. As a mother, we always want to be the safe harbor, but there I was, realizing that, perhaps, amidst the rush, I had failed to be exactly that. Have you ever thought about this? About how small things we let slip can have such a huge impact? But then, in the same letter, she wrote something that brought me hope. "I know you love me, and I love you very much too." It was a gentle reminder that, despite everything, love always finds a way to be present. At that moment, I realized it wasn't too late to change, to be more attentive, to listen more. After reading, I sat beside her and, unable to hold back the tears, hugged her tightly. I apologized for not always being present and promised to be more attentive. She, with her childlike wisdom, just smiled and said, "It's all right, Mum. I know you try." That letter was a precious gift, an invitation to reflect on what really matters. And it's worth reflecting on this ... How can we be more present in the lives of those we love? If this story touched you, maybe it's time to pay more attention to the small voices around us. After all, they often tell us the deepest truths. In the days that followed, that letter never left my mind. Every word resonated as a constant reminder that I needed to do better, to be better. I started to observe more, to listen more, even when exhaustion knocked at the door. And every small change began to unveil a world I hadn't noticed before. One afternoon, while we were at the park, my daughter ran up to me with a big smile and bright eyes. "Mom, look at that cloud. It looks like a rabbit." Before, I might have just nodded, distracted with something message on the cell phone. But this time, I looked up, really looked, and saw the rabbit dancing in the sky. We sat on the grass and spent a good amount of time imagining stories about the shapes of the clouds. And in that moment, I realized something simple, yet powerful. Being present is not just being physically beside someone, but being truly involved. If you've ever experienced something similar, you know what I'm talking about. Small moments that previously went unnoticed now became precious. And this is where things get interesting. Because by making space for these small experiences, I started to feel more connected. Not just with her, but with myself. The change wasn't only for her, but for both of us. There was something special about sharing laughs in the midst of a lazy afternoon, seeing the world through the curious eyes of a child. She began to tell me about her days, about her friends at school, about her little achievements. And I, in return, started to share more about myself, about my own challenges and victories. This genuine exchange brought us closer in a way I hadn't expected. But there's a detail that changes everything. This experience also made me reflect on how I relate to other people in my life. Was I really listening to my friends, my family, or was I just superficially present? Does this remind you of any situation? I began to apply the same attention to other areas. At work, I started to pay more attention to conversations, to really listen to what my colleagues had to say. I discovered that many times what seemed to be an unsolvable problem had a simple solution. But I hadn't noticed because I was too distracted. And at home, family meals became moments of true sharing, where everyone had their space to speak and be heard. As the days passed, I noticed that my daughter was changing too. She seemed more confident, more willing to share her feelings and dreams. And every time she came to me with a new story or a curious question, I felt that familiar warmth in my chest, a feeling that we were on the right path. Of course, there were still days when the fatigue was great, when the routine seemed overwhelming. But now I had a new reminder, a little letter written with colorful letters, reminding me of what really mattered. And if I stopped to think, it wasn't just about being there for her, but about fully living each moment. These moments together created a cycle of learning and love that strengthened us daily. I learned that I don't need to be perfect, but that sincere effort and authentic love are enough to build deep bonds. And maybe, upon reflecting on this, you too can find ways to connect more deeply with those around you. Maybe it's a conversation you've been postponing, or quality time that needs to be prioritized. After all, life is made up of these little moments that, together, build unforgettable stories. That night, as I put my daughter to bed, she whispered, "Good night, Mum. I love you." And in that instant, I felt a peace I hadn't felt in a long time. I knew that, despite all my imperfections, I was on the right path. And in a way, that letter became a silent guide, a constant reminder that love is the foundation of everything. If this story touched some part of your heart, maybe it's time to listen more, to see more, to be more present. Because in the end, these are the moments that really matter. And who knows, by doing so, you might also discover something new about yourself and those you love. And so we continue one day at a time, building memories and strengthening bonds in a world that becomes more beautiful with each moment shared. The next morning, as the sun began to illuminate the house, my daughter walked into the kitchen with a notebook in her hands. "Mum, look what I drew," she said, with an enthusiasm that made me smile instantly. It was a drawing of us, holding hands, surrounded by colorful hearts. I felt a warm sensation in my chest, a silent confirmation that we were on the right path. While I was preparing breakfast, she started telling me about the dream she had the night before. She spoke of adventures in a magical world, with details so vivid that it was almost as if I had been there too. And as I listened to her, I realized how these children's narratives, full of imagination and purity, are essential to nurture the connection between us. If you have ever been in a situation where a simple conversation opened up a new world of possibilities, you know what I am talking about. These moments, although small, have a transformative power. They not only strengthen bonds, but also teach us to see life through a more colorful and optimistic lens. In the days that followed, each interaction seemed to gain new significance. One day, as we were walking to school together, she held my hand and said, "Mum, did you know that trees talk?" I laughed softly, intrigued. "They tell stories when the wind passes through them," she continued, with a sense of wisdom that only children can have. And this is where things get even more interesting. I started to realize that by making room for imagination and these little stories, I was also learning. I was learning to slow down, to appreciate the present, and to see beauty in the simple things that often go unnoticed. Life suddenly felt richer, more vibrant. Small rituals like having meals together or walking in the park became opportunities to create lasting memories. And on each of these occasions, I realized how much I was growing, not just as a mother, but as a person. I still remember an afternoon when we were sitting on the porch watching the sunset. She turned to me and said, "Mum, have you noticed how the sky changes color?" It was such a simple observation, yet it carried a depth that made me reflect. How many times had I seen the same spectacle without really paying attention? In that moment, I allowed myself to be vulnerable and admitted to her that often We failed to see the beauty in everyday things. She looked at me with her bright eyes and said, "But now you see, right?" And at that instant, I understood that something inside me had indeed changed. Perhaps you have experienced something similar, where an innocent and pure perspective brought a new light to your life. It's worth reflecting on how we can cultivate this ability to see the world with renewed eyes, full of wonder. Over time, our relationship became a safe space to share dreams and fears, both hers and mine. She taught me that it is possible to create a welcoming environment where emotions can be expressed without fear of judgment. And for that, I am eternally grateful. This experience led me to reflect on other relationships in my life. How was I connecting with the people around me? Was I offering the same openness and attention that I now offer to my daughter? Does it remind you of a situation where you felt you could have done more? I decided it was time to apply this learning to all my interactions. I started looking people in the eyes when I talked, listening attentively to their stories, and genuinely caring about their experiences. I discovered that by doing so, I also felt more fulfilled and connected. These small changes began to reverberate, creating waves of positivity and understanding in my life. And at the end of each day, when I reflected on everything that had happened, I felt a deep gratitude for having had the opportunity to learn so much from a little letter written by my daughter. That night, as I was putting her to bed, she hugged me and whispered, "Mum, thank you for always listening to me." Her words were a sweet reminder that despite the imperfections and challenges, we were on the right path. I knew that together we were building a solid foundation of love and trust. If this story resonated with you, perhaps it's time to open yourself to the small voices and stories around you. Because in the end, it is these connections that give life meaning. And who knows, by doing so, you may also discover new horizons and possibilities that once seemed distant. Thus, we move forward together, one day at a time, building a richer and more meaningful world, one moment at a time. And deep down, I know that this journey of discovery and connection is merely the beginning of something very special. The next morning, I woke up with a renewed sense of purpose. As I prepared the coffee, my mind wandered over the small changes that had been occurring in our life. It was as if a previously fogged window had been opened, allowing the light to pour in and illuminate every corner of our familiar world. And I wondered, how many other windows were waiting to be opened? My daughter ran into the kitchen, this time with an even bigger smile on her face, carrying a new sheet of paper. "Look, Mom! I drew an adventure that we can live together." On the paper, there was a series of colorful scenes, the two of us exploring a magical forest, navigating unknown seas, and even flying in the skies in a balloon. Her imagination knew no bounds, and I felt grateful to be able to share those moments. As I observed every detail of the drawing, I realized that the simplicity of a child's imagination was an invitation to dream more, to set aside adult concerns for a moment, and simply be. Have you ever allowed yourself to dive into a world of dreams like this? It's surprising how these small escapes can bring so much joy and renewal. That weekend, we decided to bring some of the drawing's adventures to life. We went to the park, where we created our own magical forest among the trees. With each step, we invented stories, each more fantastic than the last. And in that space of imagination and freedom, I felt as if time had stopped, as if nothing else mattered beyond that moment. These experiences started to become a precious habit. Each walk, each conversation, was an opportunity to connect more deeply. And at the same time, I was learning to apply this new perspective to my professional and personal life. I began to notice that, when I allowed myself to dream and explore, I found new solutions and ideas that had previously seemed out of reach. One day, during a work meeting, I was surprised by an idea that stemmed from a casual conversation I had with my daughter. "What if we approached the project as if it were an adventure?" I suggested, inspired by our playful moments. The curious look on my colleagues' faces reminded me of the importance of bringing a bit of imagination into everyday life. And to my surprise, the idea was well received, showing that sometimes a playful approach can open doors to innovative solutions. And this is where things get even more interesting. I started to realize that this new way of seeing the world was impacting not only my relationship with my daughter, but also my interactions with friends and colleagues. Conversations became richer, more open, and connections deeper. Have you ever thought about how small changes in perspective can completely transform the way we relate to the world? As the days went by, I noticed that my daughter was also flourishing. She seemed more confident, more creative, and most importantly, happier. And I knew this was a direct reflection of the environment we were building together. It was a constant reminder that being truly present can have a profound and lasting impact. One night, as we were lying in bed, ready to sleep, she turned to me and asked, "Mom, do you think we can make a list of all the adventures we want to live?" It was a simple idea, but it carried the promise of many special moments ahead. And so we began to create a list, full of dreams and wishes, that would become our guide to exploring the world together. These little rituals became anchors in our day-to-day life, constantly reminding us of what truly matters. And reflecting on all of this, I realized that despite the challenges and imperfections, we were on the right path. We were building something beautiful and meaningful, one day at a time. If this story has brought some light to your heart, maybe it's time to allow yourself to dream more, to explore more, to connect more deeply with those you love. Because, in the end, it's these shared moments that truly matter, that transform us and teach us to live fully and authentically. And who knows, by doing this, you might also discover a world of possibilities that once seemed distant. Thus, we move forward with our hearts open and our list of adventures in hand, ready to build memories that will last a lifetime. And deep down, we know that this journey is just the beginning of something truly special. The next morning, I woke up with a feeling of gratitude that warmed my heart. The soft sunlight was coming through the curtains, filling the room with a welcoming calm. As I got up, I noticed that my daughter was already awake, sitting in the living room with an open book on her lap. She looked up and gave me a smile that made any day start well. "Good morning, Mum. Look, I'm learning about constellations," she said, pointing to the illustrations in the book. Her eyes shone with that insatiable curiosity that only children possess. And then it occurred to me that perhaps it would be a good idea to explore the sky together that night. "What do you think about having a stargazing night?" I suggested. Her eyes lit up even more and she nodded enthusiastically. During the day, while handling daily responsibilities, that innocent anticipation of looking at the night sky for stars stayed with me. I realized that although life was made up of commitments and deadlines, it was possible to find moments to marvel at the simplicity and beauty of the world. Have you ever stopped to think about how small gestures can transform an ordinary day into something special? As the sun set, we prepared a small picnic and settled in the backyard. The sky was clear, dotted with stars that began to appear one by one. "Look, Mum, that looks like a hunter," my daughter pointed out, referring to Orion. "And there's the Big Dipper," I added, pointing in the same direction. Each discovery was met with laughter, and we imagined stories for each constellation we identified. And this is where things get even more interesting. In the quiet of that night, enveloped by the vastness of the universe, I realized the transformative power of moments like that. The connection we were nurturing was not just between the two of us, but also with something much greater. It was as if, by gazing at the starry sky, we were reminded that we are part of a vast fabric of stories and possibilities. Later, as we were gathering things to go back inside, my daughter asked, "Mum, do you think the stars have adventures too?" That simple question made me reflect on the depth of a child's imagination. Perhaps, in her simplicity, she was right. Maybe the stars, like us, also have their own stories and journeys. And somehow, that idea brought me an indescribable comfort. In the following days, that night of stargazing continued to resonate in our lives. My daughter began to draw star maps, creating her own constellations and stories. And I, inspired by her creativity, started to incorporate more moments of contemplation and creativity into our daily lives. I realized that these small acts of imagination and connection were true anchors of happiness and peace. At work, I began to apply this same approach. Instead of seeing problems as obstacles, I started to view them as constellations waiting to be deciphered. And in doing so, I found that the solutions were often hidden in connections I had not previously noticed. This shift in perspective not only improved my productivity, but also made my work more meaningful. And if you have ever experienced something similar, you know what I'm talking about. Those moments when a simple change in the way you see the world can open doors to new possibilities. And it is here that it's worth reflecting. How can we apply this vision to other areas of our lives? How can we find beauty and meaning in things that previously went unnoticed? As days turned into weeks, our adventure list grew, as did our connection. And with each new experience, I felt more grateful for the opportunity to learn and grow alongside my daughter. She, with her unique view of the world, was teaching me to live more fully and authentically. One afternoon, while we were walking back from school, she held my hand and said, "Mum, I think we form a constellation, just the two of us." Her words, so simple and profound, resonated in my heart. In that moment, I realized that we were building something greater than just memories. We were creating our own universe of love and understanding. If this story touched some part of your heart, maybe it's time to look up at the sky and allow yourself to dream a little more. Perhaps you too can find your own constellation, where each star represents a connection, a precious moment shared with someone special. Because in the end, it's these stories and connections that really matter. And so, with our hearts full of hope and our eyes turned to the stars, we continue our journey. One day at a time, one adventure at a time, building a world full of wonders and possibilities. And deep down, I know we are just beginning to explore the endless adventures that await us. That night, as I was putting my daughter to sleep, she looked at me with her shiny eyes, still full of the constellations we had observed. "Mum, do you think we can travel to the stars one day?" she asked, her voice full of hope and curiosity. I smiled at her, feeling the gentle weight of tenderness in her question. "Maybe not physically, but in our dreams we can go anywhere," I replied, stroking her hair. While she was falling asleep, I began to reflect on how a child's imagination has the power to transport us to places that we often forget to visit. Have you ever allowed yourself to dream like that, without limits? These fantasies can be windows into a world of possibilities, where everything is possible if we have the courage to believe. The next morning, I woke up with an idea that had been forming in my mind since our night under the stars. I decided that, besides our walks and stories, we could create a small project together, an adventure journal. In it, we would record all our experiences, dreams, and discoveries. When I shared this idea with my daughter, her eyes lit up. "It will be like a storybook just for us," she exclaimed, already excited about the prospect. We started filling the pages with drawings, collages, and words that captured the essence of our moments. Each page was a new adventure, a new chapter in our shared story. And in doing so, I realized that we were not only preserving memories, but also creating a legacy of love and learning. If you've ever had a project like this, you know how much it can mean. In the days that followed, that journal became a refuge where we could be ourselves, without judgment. My daughter drew enthusiastically, while I described our adventures in words. And with each new entry, we felt the strength of our connection growing. It was as if, by recording our stories, we were solidifying our bond in a tangible way. One afternoon, as we were sitting on the porch, my daughter turned to me and said, "Mum, do you think stories have power?" I was surprised by the depth of her question. "I believe they do," I replied, pondering. "Stories have the power to teach us, connect us, and remind us of what truly matters." And at that moment, I realized she was right. Our stories, no matter how simple they were, had the power to transform us. And this is where things get even more interesting. I started applying this new understanding to other areas of my life. At work, I began to value more the stories my colleagues brought, realizing that each one carried unique lessons and experiences. And at home, our conversations became even richer, each one contributing to our adventure diary. If you've ever experienced the power of a good story, you know how deeply it can impact you. And it's worth reflecting on this. How can we use our stories to create more meaningful and authentic connections? How can we open our hearts to the narratives of those around us? Over time, our diary became an invaluable treasure, full of moments that captured the essence of our journey together. With each new entry, we felt gratitude for having each other and for the opportunity to learn and grow side by side. One night, while rereading some of the pages, my daughter pointed to a story we had written months earlier. "Look, Mum, this was our first adventure," she said with a nostalgic smile. And as we revisited that memory, I realized how much we had evolved since then. Our experiences had shaped us, made us stronger and more connected. Maybe you also have a story that marked your life, a narrative that continues to resonate in your heart. And as you reflect on this, you may discover that these stories are the foundations upon which we build our lives. That night, as I lay in bed, I felt a profound peace. I knew we were on the right path, that we were creating something beautiful and lasting. And as I closed my eyes, I allowed myself to dream of all the adventures that were yet to come, of all the stories we would still write together. If this journey touched any part of your heart, perhaps it is time to explore your own stories, to open yourself up to the narratives waiting to be told. Because, in the end, it is these stories that define us, that connect us, and that remind us of what truly matters. And so, we move forward with our journal in hand and our hearts open, ready to embrace each new day and all the possibilities it brings. We know that this is just a part of our journey, and we are eager to discover what the future holds for us. Together, we continue to write our story, one adventure at a time. The next morning, I woke up to the soft light of the sun filtering through the curtains, and a sense of expectation hung in the air. My daughter was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with a thoughtful look. "Mum, do you think we can paint the stars we saw last night?" she suggested, with an enthusiasm that lit up the room. The idea of capturing the magic of the previous night in colors and shapes seemed irresistible. We spent the morning together, spreading paints and papers across the table, each immersed in her own interpretation of that starry sky. As we painted, we talked about the constellations, about the dreams that accompanied us, and the plans we were making. "Maybe one day we can see the stars from another place, like an open field," she dreamed aloud. And at that moment, I felt that we were not just painting, but also drawing the outlines of our future. If you have ever allowed yourself a moment of pure creation, you know how liberating it can be. Art, in its simplicity, has the power to connect us with our essence, to make us see the extraordinary in the everyday. And, while looking at the colorful strokes that emerged on the paper, I realized that we were creating more than just images. We were weaving an even stronger bond between us. As days went by, that activity became a ritual that united us. Each new painting was a window into our imaginations, a reflection of the stories we shared. And through those colors and shapes, we began to explore new themes, new ideas that broadened our world. I saw in my daughter an artist in the making, but also a storyteller. Someone who saw the world with a unique and inspiring perspective. And this is where things get even more interesting. I started to notice how this practice of creating together was influencing other areas of my life. At work, my approach became more creative, more open to new possibilities. I discovered that by applying the same freedom of expression that we cultivated at home, I could find innovative solutions to challenges that previously seemed insurmountable. Have you experienced how creativity can transform your way of seeing the world? At home, our conversations became deeper and more meaningful. Each new idea that arose was met with enthusiasm, and I learned to value the wisdom my daughter brought, no matter how simple it might seem. She taught me that, often, the key to solving a complex problem lies in the simplicity of a new perspective. One afternoon, as we were sitting in the garden, watching the butterflies dancing in the wind, my daughter looked at me and said, "Mom, each butterfly has its own colors, like our paintings." Her words resonated in my heart, reminding me that every moment, no matter how small, carried its own beauty and meaning. And as I reflected on this, I realized how much we were growing together, learning to appreciate every nuance of our journey. Over time, our adventure journal became a compendium of precious moments, each page brimming with life and color. With each new entry, we felt the strength of our connections solidify, reminding us that we were creating something lasting and meaningful. And as we revisited these memories, we noticed how much we had evolved, how each experience had shaped us. That night, as I tucked her into bed, my daughter hugged me and whispered, "Mum, every day is a new adventure, right?" I smiled, feeling profound gratitude for the opportunity to share these journeys with her. "Yes, my love, every day is a new chance to discover something amazing," I replied, stroking her hair. In the days that followed, that philosophy of life guided us, inspiring us to seek beauty in the everyday, to find wonders in the little things. And if you've ever experienced something similar, you know how these moments can transform your perspective, bringing a new light to your life. If this journey touched some part of your heart, maybe it's time to embrace your own adventures, to open up to the stories waiting to be told. Because, in the end, it is these experiences that define us, that connect us, and that remind us of what truly matters. And so, we move forward, hand in hand, ready to explore each new day and all the possibilities it brings. We know this is only a part of our story, and we look forward to discovering what the future holds for us. Together, we continue to write our story, one adventure at a time, with hearts full of hope and eyes turned to the stars. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of serenity that I hadn't felt in a long time. The sun was gently streaming through the window, and I could hear the peaceful sounds of the beginning of a new day. As I got up, I noticed that my daughter was already in the living room, focused on a new project. "Mum, I'm drawing a map of our treasure," she announced enthusiastically, pointing to a sheet full of lines and colorful symbols. The idea of a treasure hunt brought a smile to my face. It was another opportunity to create memories and explore the world through her curious eyes. "Shall we hide clues in the backyard and discover them together?" I suggested, already imagining the fun we would have. She agreed excitedly, and we spent the morning planning every detail of our adventure. Have you ever participated in something that brought out the childlike spirit in you? These moments have an incredible power to reconnect us with the simplicity and joy of living. As we hid the clues and drew the map, I felt that we were not only playing, but also strengthening our bond of companionship. In the afternoon, with the map in hand, we began our treasure hunt. Each clue found was celebrated with laughter and hugs, turning the backyard into a scene of discoveries and surprises. With each new step, my daughter led the exploration with a determination and joy that were contagious. "Look, Mum, the next clue is near the tree," she exclaimed, running towards our next destination. And this is where things get interesting. I realized that this simple activity was teaching us valuable lessons about patience, cooperation, and creativity. As we followed the clues, I began to reflect on how I was applying these same lessons in my life. Was I being patient enough with the challenges I encountered? Was I truly collaborating with the people around me? At the end of the hunt, we found the treasure we had previously hidden, a small box full of treats and a letter we wrote to each other. Reading her sweet and sincere words, I felt a familiar warmth and deep gratitude for having these moments with her. It was a reminder that even in the simplest activities, we can find meaning and connection. In the days that followed, that treasure hunt continued to resonate in our lives. My daughter began to create new adventures, always with a map and a story to tell. And I, inspired by her creativity, started to apply this approach to everyday challenges, always seeking to see beyond the obvious and find new perspectives. One night, while we were having dinner, my daughter asked me, "Mum, what is your biggest dream?" I was surprised by the depth of her question and took a moment to answer. "I think my dream is to see you grow up happy and find your own path," I replied, feeling a wave of emotion. She smiled, a smile that reminded me that we were on the right track. If you have ever had someone who inspired you to dream bigger, you know the impact it can have. And it is worth reflecting on this. How can we nurture these dreams in ourselves and in others? How can we create an environment where imagination flourishes and possibilities are endless? As time passed, our routine became enriched with these moments of imagination and discovery. Each day brought a new opportunity to learn and grow together, to find joy in the small things, and to celebrate everyday triumphs. Reflecting on all of this, I realized how much my life had changed since I started seeing the world through my daughter's eyes. That night, while I was putting her to bed, she hugged me tightly and whispered, "Mom, thank you for always playing with me." Her words were a sweet reminder that, despite the imperfections, we were creating something special. And when I closed my eyes, I felt a profound peace, knowing that we were building a legacy of love and learning. If this story touched some part of your heart, maybe it's time to allow yourself to dream a little more, to explore your own adventures, and to connect more deeply with those you love. Because in the end, it is these experiences that define us, that connect us, and that remind us of what truly matters. And who knows, by doing this, you may also discover a world of possibilities that once seemed distant. And so, we move forward with our hearts open and ready to embrace each new day. We know this is just a part of our story, and we are eager to discover what the future holds for us. Together, we continue to write our story, one adventure at a time, with hope and eyes always turned to the stars. Before you go, do 2 things now. Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell to receive the next messages. And share this video with someone who needs to hear this today. To continue, watch the next video. It's already in the cards and also in the description.